everyone. Today's episode is a little different. We'll still get some confessions, but this time you'll also get a sneak peek at a new book in the EOS Impact series, one that I wrote with Marisa Smith. And I'm really excited to share that with you. So stay tuned for another great episode of Bad Boss Confessional. Hi, I'm Beth Fahey, and welcome to Bad Boss Confessional. I've been a leader for over 30 years, and I'll be honest, I've made plenty of mistakes along the way. The thing is, those mistakes taught me more about leadership than any success ever did. This podcast is where we get honest about the moments we'd rather forget and discover why they're the ones worth remembering. Each week, I talk with leaders who aren't afraid to share their worst boss moments and what they learned from them. Because here's what I know: every great leader has a story they're not proud of. This is where we tell those stories. Today, I'm talking with my co-author and fellow EOS implementer, Marisa Smith. Marisa implemented EOS in her own company, then joined EOS Worldwide as Director of Marketing, where she helped grow the company by over 400%. But here's what I love about Marisa. She's the embodiment of help first. She genuinely cares about making the next person successful. Her fingerprints are all over the EOS implementer community, from leadership team manuals to how we teach marketing strategy, creating a ripple effect that impacts thousands of EOS users. Marisa and I wrote Rollout together because we kept seeing leadership teams running great on EOS while the rest of the organization struggled to keep up. Today, we're diving into our own boss mistakes, the ones that taught us exactly why Rollout matters. We're bringing the confessions today, and they're the kind that made us write the book in the first place. So, Marisa, I'm so excited to finally get you on the podcast.
I know, me too. Good to see you again.
Yeah, it's only been like 3 hours since we last spoke.
We're on speed dial together.
I know, for sure. So
Okay.
it's been quite a journey, right? We've been
Mhm.
working on this almost a year now. I mean, it's really kind of coming up on that anniversary. I was just thinking about that.
But it seems like just yesterday.
It does seem like just yesterday that we were talking about this idea that, it's something that we can both relate to because we both implemented EOS in our own businesses and we've lived it ourselves, and we know what it feels like when a team is trying to roll EOS out into their organization and it's not really going as smoothly as we hoped. So I was wondering if you'd tell us a little bit about your journey pre the world of EOS implementation and marketing and all that stuff. Like, tell us about the before times.
Well, I was a typical entrepreneur, has kind of, started my business because I was frustrated in my current job. I had worked at University of Michigan for a number of years and, had an idea, wanted to take it on myself, started a business, ended up, couldn't do it all myself, hired some people and kind of, just kept going through doors that were opening for me. And one day I woke up and had a team and had a bunch of people relying on me and realized that I had kind of accidentally set the company up to rely on me, right? A lot of things had to go through me in order to get them done, and because of that, I felt a little trapped by my business. I just felt like I couldn't take a day off, I couldn't take a vacation because the way I had set the business up, it was like I always used to describe it like I was the sun and everything was orbiting around me, which is not scalable, right? And so, luckily, I was introduced to EOS and the book Traction, and as we started to self implement EOS, I started to see some results from that, but it was really when I hired an implementer that we really saw some major results after doing that. So
So when you started rolling EOS out, you were a self-implementer, right? And
yes, right.
what were some of the things that you learned that were the ahas for you?
Well, again, I was the visionary, right? So, like many visionaries, I thought, oh, I get it. This is going to be super easy. And so, we started using the tools, and I just kind of introduced them at a meeting and said, we're going to do this without really any context or additional information. I didn't even really give everybody a copy of the book. We just started running level 10 meetings. They were super clunky. Embarrassingly, I just printed out a copy of the P&L and handed it out to everybody, thinking, well, I'm supposed to be transparent about numbers, so I'll just be transparent. But people didn't understand financials. I mean, it was kind of a disaster, I'll be honest. And so, through that, I suddenly realized that I was probably oversimplifying it, and I needed to take a step back and be a little more methodical about it. And so that's when I reached out to an implementer to try to figure out how had I screwed this up. And it was through my experience talking to him that I realized that we really weren't fully on the same page, that I was trying to do things too quickly, and I needed to take a big step back and get the leadership team on the same page before trying to get everybody else in the company on the same page. And so we took a step back. He walked us through the actual process that you're supposed to be following, and lo and behold, it worked better uh, than the way I was kind of shotgunning it, right? So that was my first aha, that the process is the process for a reason, right? You don't know better than Gino Wickman, who had done it hundreds of thousands of times before, right? And so, that was probably one of the big ahas, was just realizing that I needed to be humble, right, and listen to the experts and not just try to do it all myself. So
Yeah, I mean, we've never seen that before with our own clients,
never,
right?
right? Exactly. Well, and I think that's the thing. When I see a client about to do what I did, I'm like, wait, don't do that, right? It's
Yeah.
really hard sometimes to watch people make the same mistakes that you yourself have made, right? And at the same time, sometimes people have to make those mistakes to really learn for themselves. You can't always save everybody from from that, because that's how you learn, is by screwing it up sometimes too, right? So the art of not letting people completely drive off the cliff, but maybe they go off into the rumble strips a little bit,
Yeah.
is some of what we have to learn as implementers, right?
Right,
So
right.
mhm,
Yeah, because it's not your company at the end of the day, and,
exactly.
you can you sometimes confessions of an implementer here is that,
Hmm.
we're just sometimes watching and, with guidance, like, we're not gonna
Hmm.
let you completely go off the rails, right?
Right,
But
right.
but sometimes, like, if you're not setting rock smart, we might just
Hmm.
stay quiet and not
Hmm.
really help you that much so that you can
Right.
learn more
Hmm.
as you go.
Exactly.
And it's all
Exactly.
part of the process,
Right.
but it's also something that, a lot of visionaries do reach out to us as implementers,
Hmm.
right? And
Hmm.
they're like, "I needed this 5 years ago. How
Right.
fast can we get this done? Let's get this
Hmm.
out. I wanna get this out." And I remember feeling the same exact way.
Exactly.
And now when you say, "Well, we need a plan." Like, we need a
Hmm.
plan for how this is gonna roll out, and that's something that we dive into, pretty deeply. Like, we provide a roadmap essentially
Right.
for
Exactly.
people to roll EOS out into the
Hmm.
organization, and I think that
Hmm.
that's been a little bit of a missing piece, not by intent or maliciousness. It's just something that we've always had a philosophy that every company is different and they need to do it in
Right.
their own way.
Hmm.
And we've given a little bit of guidance here that I think is gonna help people with the roadmap. So, I mean, maybe you can
Right.
talk about the roadmap a little bit because that was a big aha for us as we were writing the book.
Yeah. I think it's like systemizing anything, right? How do you systemize the predictable so you can humanize the exceptional? And so we had to really look at all the different rollout experiences we had had with our different clients, and the clients of, we talked to a lot of other implementers about their experience as well. And then figuring out what's the common thread, though, right? So no matter how big the business is, how complicated the business is, where it's located, what are the things that people have in common? And so that's really where we came up with the phases, right? Is that everybody's got to prepare, everybody has to launch, right, their rollout, everybody has to integrate the tools company wide, and everybody needs to sustain their success after they have integrated everything. And so those were kind of the common phases. And then within that, you can be spontaneous and customize it and do what's right for you, based on your own unique circumstances. But regardless, you never want to integrate without preparing, right? You can't sustain until you've integrated, right? And so just figuring out what those phases were that everybody had in common, and then codifying it in a way that we could communicate it was part of the fun.
So one of my favorite parts of the book are the success stories that we share, and they didn't always start as successes, right? There were a
Hmm.
lot of clients that were struggling along the way, and I think that when they eventually got to a place where, they had implemented it all the way into the
Hmm.
organization, they were sustaining it on a regular basis. I know that both you and I were sharing together how, wow, this client really, it took them a little while
Hmm.
longer maybe on for this particular thing, but when they got it, boy, did they get it. And they
Right.
became like the poster children for how you're
Yeah.
supposed to do EOS.
Right, right. Well, it's not unlike what we just said about sometimes you have to mess it up to realize what you should have done, right? And so,
Mhm.
several of the clients in the book learned the same lesson that I did, which was, going too fast, right? Just thinking, well,
How
all we
hard
have
can
to
it
like,
be?
yeah, how hard can it be, right? We just have to roll it out. And then they would roll it out and then go, oh shoot, we should have done it in more of a phased approach, or maybe we should have explained this differently, or maybe we should have done one tool at a time, or whatever. And so, none of it was irreparable. But it probably could have been a little bit more smooth if they had just, had more of a plan before they rolled it out, right? My clients who took a little bit more time and came up with the plan before rolling it out, those tended to go more smoothly, right? On the
Mhm.
opposite side of things, I sometimes have clients who are just plan, 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 plan. And I'm like, oh my gosh, would you just roll it out already? Right. So they're kind of waiting for perfection before they get started. And so, again, it's that how do you, helping them find the balance between going too fast and potentially having to redo things because it didn't go that well, versus going so slowly that they're not seeing any results, and then they're being frustrated by that too. So finding the
Mhm.
just right, the Goldilocks,
Mhm.
right in the middle, is part of what we have to do as implementers. Is a lot of times they just don't know what they don't know, right? And so helping them imagine what's possible, understand what might happen, but then ultimately it's up to them to come up with their plan and execute it themselves. They know their company's best, right? So all we can do is give guidance and and support, really.
Yeah, and I think just being there to ask the questions that
Yeah.
are sometimes the harder questions. I mean, that's really one of
Hmm.
the biggest contributions I think we make as
Hmm.
companies are starting to really use the tools and develop. It's just
Right.
really looking at, so for example, there's a story in the book about a client that I had that took quite a while to roll EOS out into their organization, and they were gracious enough to be named in the book.
Hmm.
And one of the things that we noticed was during an annual that a lot of the issues that they had on their issues list were either departmental issues that they were still
Hmm.
solving 2 years later,
Hmm.
or that there were certain themes that like sort of made you think that maybe there's an issue in the marketing department, for
Hmm.
example.
Hmm.
And the issues list sort of reveals everything that's really going
Hmm.
on in the organization. And I had a fit in one of these annuals, and I started throwing the squishy animals, because it was like, come on, guys, these,
Right.
if we would just roll this out. And so, of course, now they've become the poster children. They've got all kinds of trainings. They've
Hmm.
invested a lot of time, energy, and effort into their mid managers because really they're the team that is going to carry it forward. And that's
Hmm.
something, a refrain that we hit pretty often in the book.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. I have another client who similar to yours where, when they started, it was about a 25-person company. So it was basically the leadership team was the mid-manager team, right? Everybody
Mhm.
reported to the leadership team. And as they started to put another layer of managers in place, the leadership team continued to be the people who kind of own the vision. They didn't really help the mid managers learn to own the vision until about 2 years in. They were still going like, oh my gosh, we just feel like we're pushing this thing uphill, and the aha that we all had was that it was because they really hadn't taught the mid managers to have the same
Mhm.
sense of ownership over the vision as the leadership team had, right? And so they spent a good year saying like, we really need to train the mid managers to not just understand what our core values are and things like that, but why we're doing all of this, to understand the context of all of it. And that was a huge aha for them to connect the dots and do a deep dive really into the why of EOS, the why of the accountability chart, the why of the VTO, the why of the core values, like all of the why. And once they did that, it just made such a big difference in carrying the vision into the next level of the organization, because the mid managers were the ones who could see everything going on, right?
Right.
And if they waited for the leadership team to do something about it, that was never going to happen, right? They didn't have the direct connection. And so by creating that sense of ownership of the vision and the tools in the mid-manager team, that really started to drive things into the rest of the organization. But it was just part of growth, right? It wasn't something we would have talked about during rollout when they were only a 25 person company, right? But as they got to 50,
Mhm.
75 people, it was almost like they had to re-roll it out.
Mhm. With a
So that
different
was that was
mindset.
interesting, with a
Yeah,
very different mindset. Exactly. Yeah.
right.
So that was interesting. Yeah.
And I know that you're passionate about this one concept that we write about in the book, which
hmm
is shifting from student to teacher.
hmm Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that is, you know, EOS is a train the trainer model by design, right? Implementers train clients to be able to implement EOS so that they're independent of us. But leadership team members need to train the rest of the company, including the mid managers, so that they can be independent of the leadership team to some extent as well. And
Mhm.
so, but it's different to be a student of EOS than it is to be a teacher of EOS. And that's, a lot of implementers find that when we become implementers, many of us use EOS in our companies and we go to become implementers and we think, how hard can it be? And then you go, oh my goodness, it's really a lot different to be an implementer and teach EOS than it was to use it, right? The same thing happens on the leadership team where they have been learning the tools, they know how to use the tools, but then when they go to teach people how to use the tools, they don't necessarily know how to do that. And so
Right.
we as implementers have a responsibility to teach our clients how to be teachers of EOS. It's very meta, right? There's all of these different layers. Um,
It is meta.
it is meta, but when we are able to equip our clients with the knowledge to become good teachers of EOS and of the vision,
Mhm.
then that makes a huge difference in how effective it is inside the organization. So,
Yeah, and that
yeah.
mindset shift for,
hmm
the leadership team to train the mid-managers who then
hmm
train their teams,
Yep.
that's a big, we're talking about rewiring a bunch of synapses that
Yes.
have been
hmm
locked in and hardwired for a really long time, and you come in and EOS is, like, shaking all this up and
hmm
literally rewiring people's brains as they're doing it, and I know that that's another passionate area of yours,
hmm
which is the psychology of EOS,
hmm
and, I mean, we could probably
You could
fill
do a
3
whole podcast on
podcasts.
that. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, but in a nutshell, I think again, kind of like what I experienced at my first story of, trying to roll out EOS and just feeling like people weren't getting it. And, I felt kind of this resistance. I think sometimes people feel what they perceive as resistance to either the new vision or using these new tools or a new way of thinking. Um, but it's not always an intentional I am resisting, right? That's not
Mhm.
necessarily what's going on. What typically what they're experiencing is just a brain that has been used to thinking of something one way, and we are now trying to get it to think about something in a different way. And that, especially an adult brain,
Mhm.
it takes time and repetition before the adult brain can just switch to thinking about something in a different way.
Mhm.
And so helping our clients understand that that's what they're encountering and that they need to have a little bit of patience and empathy for their people,
Mhm.
um, and not just expect people to, well, I told them one time, right?
Mhm.
um, I mean, we even teach the concept in focus day of 7 times, right? That we need to repeat things multiple times before people really hear it for the first time. That's starting to introduce that concept to our clients that, they're going to need to repeat things multiple times before people really hear it. And again, it's not
Mhm.
because people are being annoying, right?
Mhm.
It's just because that's how the brain works. It doesn't necessarily recognize that this is a thing that they're going to need to
Right.
assimilate until it hears it multiple times, and then the brain kind of goes, oh, hey, I've heard this a few times, maybe I should pay attention now. Right?
Right.
So, yeah, yeah, it's
And
it's
I
an
like to
actual.
yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
and I also like when our clients, it's usually around the first quarterly, I've noticed.
Mhm.
When they're sort of it's the dreaded Tuckman's model. I'm gonna bring it up, Marissa. But, the forming, storming, norming, and performing,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
When you get to the first quarterly, they're kinda hitting the bottom of the curve,
Mhm.
right? Where it feels like it's a lot of work. It feels like you're pushing a boulder up the hill, and
Mhm.
literally,
Mhm.
to follow the curve, you are going up a hill.
Mhm.
But what I always tell my clients is just wait until people start experiencing the benefits of getting
Mhm.
rocks done, or
Mhm.
the benefits of a level 10 meeting that's
Mhm.
clear, and you've got actionable things coming out of that meeting that are going to
Mhm.
actually change how you operate as a business. It will happen, but it's not going to happen overnight, and we just have to keep beating the drum on
Mhm.
following the process and trusting the
Mhm.
process, and then
Mhm.
it will eventually become part of people's DNA and
Right.
how they operate, and they won't remember what it was like
Mhm.
to not have EOS.
Right,
Right.
right. Well, and that repetition and that consistency, that's where the integrator really shines, right? So going back to both of our stories, we both were, I think, in the visionary role. And so, you know, it's not uncommon for the visionary to be impatient and to say, well, I said it this one way and it's not hitting, so let me change how I said it because maybe they'll hear it this other way. And we're not great at repetition necessarily. We're not great at consistency. And that can actually cause confusion and ripples of a lack of clarity throughout the organization versus an integrator who's going to be typically somebody who's better at repeating the same message over and over again, doing the same thing over and over again, having that patience and having that ability to be consistent and clear about communication. That it's so critical. In the rollout phase to do that, because you can't just say it once and be like, ta-da, it's and expect everybody to just get on board, right? So that integrator role is critical there.
And, we talk about the integrator as the rollout champion in the book,
Mhm.
and there can be other people who are rollout champions, but
Sure.
typically it is the
Mhm.
integrator that's
Mhm.
driving rollout throughout the
Mhm.
organization, and just
Mhm.
having that concept and essentially saying, "Look, you've got to assign roles as part
Mhm.
of this process."
Right.
And I think what I experienced and what you experienced was, I sat in visionary and integrator at the time that we
Mhm.
rolled out. So, I
Mhm.
mean, you
Me
know,
too. Me too.
whenever they
Yeah.
whenever we talk in the 90-minute meeting,
Mhm.
because if the visionary's in the integrator seat, you'll see all these, spikes of activity,
Guilty.
and I'm like,
Guilty. Yeah.
"Yes,
Mhm.
that was me." And
Mhm.
so oftentimes, it takes a while to get the right
Mhm.
integrator into the seat, and then once that happens, sometimes we're re-rolling EOS out
Exactly.
into an organization, and I've
Mhm.
certainly experienced that, not only personally, but with my clients.
Mhm. Yeah,
And
exactly.
and and I think the book is handy for people who are re-rolling out or feel like
Mhm.
EOS rollout just wasn't really all that great. And so
Hmm.
there's definitely a place to pick up from there and to help.
Yeah. Yeah, I think another thing that I have seen some teams do is they get to the 80% strong mark and
Mm,
they go, ah, we're done.
yeah, we got
And
it.
in fact, and then suddenly there's this backsliding that happens, right? Because they're not putting the effort into sustaining the rollout, right? They,
Mhm,
as new people are coming into the organization, they're kind of expecting people to just get on board by osmosis and that they'll
mhm.
just understand what the tools are and they'll go to a couple level 10s and they'll just get it and they'll figure out what the core values mean
Yep.
and all those things happen, but it doesn't take too many new people in the organization for it to start to chip away at the strength of those components. And so
Mhm,
that's where I've seen people, like you said, kind of need to re-roll it out or at least shore up their rollout and go back and get back to basics. Sometimes,
mhm,
the
mhm,
scorecard kind of started to drift. Oh, we're just doing our level 10s once a month, and just these little things
mhm.
are slipping. And then they're saying, "Gosh, this EOS just isn't working for us anymore." Well, it's because we're not really following the disciplines like we should. So
Right.
yeah, that sustainability phase is really important, that ongoing commitment to keeping it rolled out.
Yeah, and I think that's where if you've got the buy-in of the mid-managers because
Mhm,
their lives have gotten better,
mhm,
and so if they're seeing that it's working, they're definitely a help. The integrator has to help that happen as well. And
right.
then, this is what we do as implementers. We're coming
Mhm,
in and saying, "Huh, we just took the org checkup and this is the
mhm,
3rd year in a row we haven't had a proven process. Is
mhm,
this the year?"
right.
Right? Like,
Exactly, exactly. Yeah,
so,
is it time? Is it time?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, sustaining EOS is one of the things that I think is hard for a lot of companies because it it requires that you have systems and processes in place. So,
Mhm,
for example, we have a story in the book from Skidmore Sales where they talk about how they had the very phenomenon that you talked about a minute ago happen, where people would be new to the company and they'd say, "Okay, you've got this thing called a level 10, Monday morning, 10:30, got to be there." And this person is arriving and like,
right.
I
Huh?
I mean, this is weird. Like, what are we doing? I've never done this in a company because
Mhm,
most people
mhm,
haven't done something
mhm,
like that in a company before. So, having those processes built in and then everybody supporting them, I think is what's the key
for sure.
for it to
Yeah,
sustain.
yeah. Well, and I think the other perspective too is that it, you're not doing these things for the sake of checking a box and saying we run on EOS, right? We have a VTO, check. We have an accountability chart, check. We run level 10 meetings, check. We're doing all of these things because those are the foundational tools that if you are using them, it will help you get everybody equipped with what they need to help you achieve the vision. That's the point, right? The point of it is to achieve the vision and get it shared by all. And the EOS is a vehicle to help you do that. But I think sometimes people get a little hung up on using EOS as the reason that we're doing things. And then sometimes people, that's when you start to hear, well, EOS is a little culty or, things like that. And it's not EOS. EOS, like I said, is the vehicle. It's because we want to get our vision shared by all. And this is what we've chosen to do that, right? If we get everybody using a common language and a common set of tools and understanding the vision and understanding the structure and having priorities and numbers, like all of that, the reason for that is, for this other endpoint, it's not, like I said, it's not to check a box, right? So just getting people to connect those dots and communicate that is really important. We've talked a lot about how rollout is, it's a journey, not an event, too. And so again, sometimes people think it's a one-time thing, like we rolled it out, ta-da, right? And really need to think of it as it actually is going to take time, and then you have to keep it rolled out. But again, the reason for that is so that we can continue to update our vision achieve what we want to achieve, set a new set of goals, achieve that, right? If we're not doing those things, then
Right.
it's not going to work. So,
Yeah, it's like going to the
yeah,
gym, right? And
exactly.
having a trainer.
Yeah.
You
If
can
you lose 30 pounds, it doesn't just magically stay off.
right.
If only that were true. Yes.
Exactly. We've got a lot of cool tools for people uh, that you were instrumental in developing. The first one, which honestly spurred the whole idea for the book for me, at
Hmm.
least, like because I loved it so much that I kept sharing it with people. And that's our rollout tracker, or I should say your
Hmm.
rollout tracker, because that's
Yeah.
something that you developed in
Hmm.
a few years ago for the
Hmm.
EOS conference. You taught a little bit about that. And I'm wondering if you could tell us about the rollout tracker and how it came about and what it's designed to do.
Sure. So, the rollout tracker it's a one-page tool, and it's really designed to be used in conjunction with the organizational checkup. So, if you think of the organizational checkup as how you measure the strength of your organization and the six key components, the rollout tracker is telling you what you need to do to get to 80% strong, and the organizational checkup is telling you whether or not that's working. So those two things together are really helpful. What I found was that people would do the organizational checkup, see that they were not at 80%, they were at 65 or whatever, but then it wasn't necessarily clear to them what they needed to go do to shore that score up. And so with the rollout tracker, it shows you, well, did you do a good job of preparing to roll out EOS? Did you launch in an effective way and introduce EOS and your tools and your vision to the rest of the organization in an effective way? Have you fully integrated, the level 10 meeting and the rocks and the scorecards? Are you using your core values to hire, fire, review, reward, and recognize, right? So just all of the things that you need to do to achieve 80% strong on the organizational checkup uh, and above. Um, so it kind of gives you the roadmap to how to do that, and then you use the organizational checkup to discover whether or not it's your rollout is actually working. So those two things really work well together. So that's one use of it, and the other is really at the very beginning of the journey. People don't completely understand when you say rollout in vision building day two, they kind of look at you like, okay, I kind of get it, but they don't really understand step one, step two, step three, step four, right? And so this kind of gives you that roadmap of, and if you want to get here, here's all the things that you need to do to get there. So it kind of paints a picture of what it looks like to be fully rolled out so that you can then come up with a plan that works for you and your organization to get you there. So that's the idea.
And these tools, by the way, are available at rolloutbook.com, which is our website where we have lots of free tools. And among the rollout tracker, I mean, or besides the rollout tracker, we have the rollout reflection guide. So that's helping people get their plan together prior to, rolling EOS out. And then the third tool we have is the troubleshooting guide, which if you've already rolled EOS out, you can refer back to it. So this is a book that the way that we wrote it was intended to be picked up at any point in your journey, right? This isn't just for somebody new to EOS and rolling EOS out. It's for those who have already rolled it out and just want to take it from here to here, right? And so those tools I think are going to be extremely helpful for folks. And, nothing like a good worksheet. We're both big fans.
Exactly. We love checking boxes.
We like checking boxes.
That's right. That's right.
And I'd like to say that this book is not written for visionaries, right?
Right. Yeah, this book is really written for, I mean, a visionary certainly can read it and get value from it, but it's also written for the integrator and all of the members of the leadership team, and really anybody, and mid-manager, anybody who's responsible for either getting EOS rolled out or keeping EOS rolled out inside the organization. Somebody in HR, right? Even if they're not on the leadership team, but if they're responsible for training and onboarding and things like that, this can be a really helpful book for them to understand how to, again, get people onboard new people into the organization so that they understand both EOS and the vision for the organization. So I think there's a lot of different use cases for it and
Hmm.
a lot of different people who would benefit from it. But it's not, it is who it's not intended for is kind of the frontline worker, right? That's
Hmm.
what the heck is EOS is for. So that book was written several years ago by Gino Wickman and Tom Bauer, and that was really designed to kind of prepare the team for rollout so they had the context of EOS so that when you start to roll out, they're not sitting there going, what the heck is EOS? So it
Hmm.
answers that question for them. So that tool is really for all of the employees. And then that book is for all of the employees. And this book is really for, everybody else who's going to be, again, responsible for either rolling it out or keeping it rolled out. So
Yeah. Or who has LMA in their seat. And that's the one,
exactly. Yep.
that's the thing that we did have a chapter on, which
Hmm.
is towards the end of the book is just pulling it all together and how
Right.
do you drive accountability in the
Hmm.
organization using EOS. So
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, it's been a fun journey, writing the book. I didn't want to do this alone, and I don't think you did either. So it was really fun to have a partner going through this process and coming up with everything so that we could. And basically, weren't we just confessing the whole time that we were writing the book? Like we were like, oh yeah,
Yeah, I did this. Yeah, yeah.
exactly. So, what not to do is
Right,
basically
right, right, right. Yeah.
what the book was for. We just want to help people get there faster and in a smoother way.
Mhm.
Um, so I know that we've veered off and we've done a shameless plug of our book for almost this entire podcast, but I think that embedded in it are all of the foibles that people have, and it's really most of it is generally around self-awareness. I know that was my
Mhm,
issue.
mhm,
Your story sounds like, and maybe a little bit about that. And that is leadership, right? Is just like getting that level of awareness that is
mhm.
going to help you get to the next place.
Well, and just coming from a place of empathy and trying to remember what it felt like,
Mhm.
I was as the entrepreneur, I would say I was in pain.
Mhm.
I felt all of this responsibility on me, and I could not wait to share that responsibility with other people and get help. And so the reason I wanted to push it out so quickly was to get some relief from that feeling, right?
Yes,
So it was,
100%.
there was a good reason why I felt that way, but what actually ended up happening because I rushed is that I actually didn't get get the relief that I wanted, um,
Mhm.
because I actually caused a lot of confusion
Mhm.
instead, right? And
And
so
you're
if
just
yeah, yeah, and then I was like, God, it didn't work after all. So I think if I had had these tools and had some of these this process, right? And in terms of the four phases, and if I had a clearer roadmap, I think I would have had a little bit more patience and a little bit more um, empathy for my team, and I probably would have gotten there faster without kind of the screwing it up phase in between.
Mhm.
Right. So I did eventually get there. I'm happy to say that I got out of the day to day and, transitioned my company to the integrator and ultimately, sold it and all the things that I had dreamed of. But it
Mhm.
took me probably 2 extra years to get there
Mhm.
because I didn't have a clear path the first time
Yeah.
out. So yeah.
Yeah. Yep. That's the thing that I was hoping the most with this book is that it's like giving somebody a fast forward, like like if you
Right.
really want to fast forward, sometimes you got to go slow to go fast. We say this a
Hmm.
lot.
Right.
And even though taking a pause and reading the book and then coming up with a plan feels excruciatingly slow for some of us,
Right.
it's actually going to make it go faster later.
Faster.
So
Hmm.
we'll be right back after a word from our sponsors. Do you love running on EOS? Try Streti, the EOS platform people love. Native integrations and extra features help you manage people, projects, process, and engagement. Connected to your favorite EOS tools and all in one place. You love EOS. It's time to love the platform you're running it on. Try Streti free at streti.com. That's STRETY.com. Streti, the EOS platform people love. Let's be honest, hiring the right people is hard. That's why I love Titus Talent Strategies. Their whole person hiring approach helps you find and keep A players who align with your values, and they back it with an industry leading guarantee. Best part? Titus Talent Strategies is included in the entrepreneurial toolkit for companies running on EOS. Check them out at titustalent.com/EOS. And now back to my conversation with Marisa. Okay, so I'm still going to ask you the tattoo question because I ask all of my guests and you, you don't know what this is. So, if you were to get a tattoo somewhere on your body that either reminded you of this event or story, or it was something else, it just helps us learn who you are a little bit more. Have you? I don't think you have any tattoos. Is that right?
I don't, although my daughter she's got several and she keeps bugging me to get one. So, um, I think if I were to tattoo anything, it would be the phrase planned spontaneity. It's a phrase that I use in the book, but it's also a phrase that I have used since I was in college. Um, and it's this idea that, you can have a plan, you should have a plan and some structure, but you also need to be willing to be flexible within that plan and be spontaneous. And sometimes, you think you're going to go this way and you actually a different door opens, you got to go this way. But if you just, you know, approach things without any sort of plan, then you could find yourself way off in the weeds, right? And so by
Mhm.
having a plan, your road might look a little bit like this, right? Like wiggly, but it's not going to be um squiggly. Does that make sense? Right. So
It's not going to be like,
yeah, you're not going to be like veering all over the road, but you might, like I said, you might get into a rumble strips a little bit, right? But just this idea, like I said, that plan spontaneity, have an outline, have an idea, talk through some of the things that might happen, have contingency plans and things like that, so that when something unexpected happens, you're not just frozen, right?
Mhm.
You've thought through some of these things. But again, you can still be flexible within the plan, and not let it throw you off too much. And so I try to take that philosophy with my life, try to take that philosophy, teach my clients to think that way a little bit too, to sometimes you got to live a little bit in the gray. Um, and so that's what I would put on my body, plan spontaneity,
ah, okay. Well,
which just so happens, if you want the really weird story, this was the album title for the first recording that my college a cappella group did.
ah.
And that is because we would do skits in our concerts, and I would always say, "We need to have a plan for the improv." And my my group would say, "Marissa, it's improv. We don't need a plan." And I'd say, "No, we need to have a plan." So we just joked it was planned spontaneity, and that ended up being the title of our first album, because that was what I forced them to do, is have a plan, but then be flexible within the plan. So
Uh,
dates back to 1992. I still try to live by it.
and how crazy that you are still living that philosophy because
Mhm,
what is the
mhm.
VTO if not a plan?
Land spontaneity, baby. Mhm,
And sometimes, you know,
mhm.
we get a meteor from outer space and we have to deal with
Exactly.
whatever, but at least
Mhm.
we had the plan to begin
At
with,
least you had a
right?
plan. Exactly, exactly. Yep.
All
So,
right. Well, I usually say it's been so great getting to know you, but I mean, I already know you so well. So, and instead of I'll see you soon, I'll see you in 5 minutes
exactly.
when we have our next call.
That's right.
But anyway,
Thank you
thanks
for
so much.
having me.
Yeah. Thanks for being on the podcast
Yeah.
and for helping me do a shameless plug. Not alone. Thanks to my co author and good friend, Marisa Smith, for sharing her expertise and passion around EOS rollout. You can learn more about our book and download free tools at rolloutbook.com. If you enjoyed today's episode, please like, subscribe, and share with friends who need to hear this. Thanks for listening to Bad Boss Confessional. We'll see you next week.